Hey, everybody, I am Andrew Zimmern, and in full disclosure, I am a board member and co-founder of EXPLR Media. And today I am thrilled to be the moderator for what I feel will be an incredible conversation with two of my favorite thought leaders about the power of storytelling. EXPLR Media is growing to be the leader in story-based learning, which is an approach that increases student engagement, empathy, and perspective taking. And there is nobody better to talk about that with, about the opportunities for digital storytelling in education and what opportunities those create for students to experience and be exposed to change makers in ways that build empathy for others' lived experience. So without further ado, I would like to introduce two of EXPLR Media's other co-founders, creator of this project and her companion in crime, Jenny Buccos and Kari Byron.
Hello.
Jenny, do you want to? I don't like people reading lengthy biographies and stuff. I always think it's very off-putting. Do you want to tell people a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Jenny. I am from a town of 800 people with a blinking traffic light and didn't know anyone who had a passport growing up. And somehow I landed a job at an investment bank and they dropped me in Hong Kong and Tokyo in 1999, and it completely changed my life. And for the last 20 years, I have been using video to further my own experience to help children grow up to be globally and culturally competent, and also using video to support teachers in teaching core subjects through a global lens. So that pretty much sums up the last 2 decades of my life.
Very niftily. Ms. Byron, for those who are not familiar with your CV, but may know you from many hit TV shows, most notably Mythbusters, do you want to fill us in on what you're doing here?
So I learned during Mythbusters the power of storytelling. When teachers started using episodes in their classrooms to teach physics or critical thinking or storytelling in general, we were so fortunate to have been on the air for so long and have so much influence. So being able to meet Jenny Buccos and seeing what she does and being able to combine our superpowers of storytelling and global leadership, I think we have the most amazing project in EXPLR.
Well, let's stick with that for a second. For those that aren't familiar, why don't you describe what EXPLR does?
So EXPLR has 2 platforms, a home version and a classroom version. The classroom version is very exciting for me. It's an ad-free subscription service that has original and carefully curated educational videos for teens and tweens. I am the mother of a tween, so I have a lot of personal stake in wanting my daughter to see great content that's inspiring and relevant and relatable and just real world content that she can connect with, so it can empower her to be a global agent of change as she grows up, so she can see how she works in this world and how much effect she can have on the world around her.
It's an amazing platform or pair of platforms. Jenny, maybe you could expand on the curriculum-based learning piece of this, because EXPLR is lesson competent, right?
Yeah. So EXPLR looks and feels just like an Amazon, a Netflix, a Hulu, which is kind of amazing because if a kid knows how to use that, and like honestly, like any kid over 3 knows how to use that, like you give a kid a tablet, they know exactly how to find what they're looking for. So it looks and feels just like that. And, when you go on Netflix and it says new and trending or, scary or British, for us, it'll say, STEM, arts education, social emotional learning, health and well-being. Operates just like that. Kari was talking about a classroom and a home version. The home version exactly what you would think it is. The classroom version uses the same exact videos, except there's a lesson plan that goes with every single video. And I should say the videos are under 10 minutes. And there's a reason for that. So quite honestly, like everyone's attention span is probably less than 10 minutes. But 10 minutes is that sweet spot where you can get into a story and then still have 40 minutes to deploy a lesson in a classroom. And our lessons cover everything you would expect it to cover. So STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. It covers arts education. It touches on next generation science standards. But we look at everything through a global competency lens. And I think there's a lot of misconception and misunderstanding what global competency is. A lot of people think when you're talking about another country, so say you bring up what's going on in Ukraine, you can tick the box for global competence, but that's not necessarily true. You send a student abroad, you can tick the box for global competence. That's also not necessarily true, because a lot of times when you travel abroad, people are still in that sort of mindset of us versus them. On the flip side of that, you can have an entire classroom of 25 kids with 25 different backgrounds from 25 different countries and cultures and still not be globally competent. Globally competent is not about what you know, it's about what you do. And that's something we strive for in everything we do. So how do we make sure kids are actively engaged in other people's perspectives inside the classroom and outside the classroom? How do we make sure that kids are prepared to address global challenges? So that's what we're talking about when we talk about stories through a global competency framework.
And do you achieve that? I'll ask you both this question. Do you achieve that through this very, very, very modern style of storytelling?
Well, storytelling is the oldest way of teaching. Even students that English is not their first language learn language better through storytelling. It's the perfect vehicle for helping you remember things. I was interviewing the National Spelling Bee winner, and she said for every word, she remembers a story to remember how to spell that word. We can apply storytelling from everything from literature, obviously, to science. The scientific method is a perfect narrative vehicle for trying to find the truth and foster a curiosity. So by using storytelling digitally, we are meeting kids where they already are. I don't know about you guys, but my kid learned so much from scrolling through social media platforms. She can crochet, she can do makeup, she can speak in Russian just a little bit now. It's crazy what they can learn. So why don't we give them some inspiring things to help them become adults with a global competency?
Andrew, when you asked if we're achieving global competency, because that is one of it's one of the pillars in our theory of change. Absolutely. And I think a great example of that is the series we did, Crash Test World, 2 years ago. And you can give all these statistics. So right now we're talking the day we're recording this today, March 14th, 2.5 million people have left Ukraine as refugees. Now, that is such an incomprehensible number to wrap your brain around, particularly for people like me who grew up in a town of 800 people. You just can't even fathom that. But in our series, we told the story of one Syrian refugee family.
We went to Lebanon, then Turkey, by boat to Greece, then by train to Germany. My little son was 3, and the twins were 7. The weather was very stormy, and that was very difficult.
It took the family several days to cross multiple countries. The entire time, fearing they'd be deported back to Syria, and a life of war and uncertainty.
See, I'm a mom too, and I can't imagine how hard it would be to take your children on such a long journey and try to keep the spirits up.
My kids were scared, so I took a lot of pictures. I told them we were going on a trip, not fleeing a war.
And when we saw the border police, I told my daughter and sons to say hello and not be afraid. I had a balloon in my hand, and when the police were next to me, I was scared. I just waved the balloon, and he laughed.
After arriving in Germany, they spent 2.5 years in a shelter. But now, they are more settled.
We have a very nice apartment, very nice lives, and the kids have a good school.
And that experience, and I know Kari's daughter and her school, they responded to that. They wanted to know more about the Syrian refugee crisis. They wanted to know how they could help other kids. They wanted to know what happened to kids when they cross borders. How do they get integrated into society? So that's where that storytelling element can really drive empathy, understanding, engagement, especially around these topics that are just so big to understand. Not just at a kid's level, but on an adult level.
Do you find? No, go ahead, Kari.
It was that relatability which really helped the storytelling communicate with the kids in my daughter's class, because they were watching a story of a 9-year-old girl and her family, and that one story of them crossing over to Berlin. And my daughter came home, she's like, she's just like me. I'm playing Roblox on my phone and she's playing Roblox on her phone. It gave her that moment of understanding that we're so much more alike.
Do you find as you're rolling these programs out and you're making these videos, you both touched on the way students react to this new type of lesson planning. I imagine watching a 10-minute video and having a 40-minute discussion in the classroom that's curriculum based is something that is you get much greater engagement from students and I would assume from teachers than you would if you were simply reading the front page of the local newspaper and bringing kids up to date on how that applies to a history lesson from 10 or 15 years ago.
Absolutely. And we have feedback on that. So another example of this is we recently did a series on recycling. So you can talk about 9% of plastic ever made, only 9% of plastic ever made has ever been recycled. And even if that's been recycled, it's probably part of it is in our ocean or been incinerated or buried in the ground. So we had a communication with a teacher in upstate New York who said, well, kids don't really see the relevance to this because they drop their stuff in the recycling bin. And once they understood that 9% and the impact it has, the lesson moved beyond that engagement, and they understood that they were participants in what was happening, and they petitioned their school board to have single-use plastic and styrofoam trays banned within their school. That's the level of engagement we're talking about. So again, 9%, let's talk statistics. Everybody knows plastic is a problem. Let's show what that looks like in a real world scenario. Let's show kids in another community who are trying to address it. And let's give kids like the agency and the platform to be change agents. That's global competency. That's solving global issues. And when you do things like that, when kids have agency, when kids have a voice, when kids have a platform, yes, they show up to class, they show up engaged, they show up excited because it is real world and relevant to them. So if you say, oh, I don't want to learn science, I'm not going to be a scientist. I don't want to learn math. When am I ever going to learn this? Real world and relevancy are probably two of the most important things in education. And I think a lot of us have forgotten that. When am I ever going to use this? How am I ever going to use this?
Well, let's flip that around and go to the opposite side of the teaching spectrum, because when I was younger, I remember saying, when am I ever going to use a quadratic equation in my real life, right? So when you talk about this new style of storytelling, you're talking about what I would say is the modern and what some people would find as being somewhat non-traditional based on how lesson planning was done, say 30, 40 years ago. But you're also doing it with the most traditional. I mean, you're doing it with math, right?
Absolutely. We have a show called Sums of Anarchy, which kind of shows You know, they're using storytelling to help understand math.
Algorithms have been thrown about in the past few years as a sort of buzzword, particularly in the world of social media. But the truth is, the concept of algorithms is nothing new. They've been used in mathematics for thousands of years, and they've even been used for code breaking as far back as the 9th century. In fact, we get the word algorithm from algorithmi, which is the Latin form of the name of this guy, Al-Khwarizmi, a 9th century Persian mathematician. So the next time Netflix recommends you a show you might like based on another show you already liked, you got this guy to thank. We can also thank him for the word algebra, which comes from a book he wrote about solving equations, which he marvellously named The Compendious Book on Calculation by Completion and Balancing. Amazing.
There's so many wonderful ways to use these videos to actually give you that relevance. I mean, if you looked at me when you were a kid and said you didn't understand why you could use the quadratic equation, I would say, do you skateboard? How do you figure out the height of your ramp? Well, there you go. So that's math right there. You just have to find things that connect.
It's a brilliant example. This is a new way to engage with students, but also this storytelling allows students to engage. I mean, look, it works from 9 to 5 at school, but it also works from 5 to 9 with their parents at home, right? Or caregivers. Seems to me that, hard for me to share my homework on quadratic equations with my parents, but showing them some skateboard videos and how I can actually use mathematics to figure out how to build a ramp in my backyard is something that I can share with my parents and enjoy with them.
Absolutely. And this was intentional. So what you learn in the classroom, you then take it home and you discuss over dinner with your caregivers or whoever is in your home with you, so that, your mom saying, well, what did you learn in school today? Well, I learned how to do fractions. That's not the conversation that we're seeing. We're seeing this spark like thoughtful dialogue at home and dialogue around like big topics. We're talking like access to education and the sustainable development goals and empathy and cyberbullying, financial literacy. I mean, just the fact that when I was a kid, I didn't know what the inside of like a checkbook looked like, and you never asked your parents what they made and what they were saving. These are conversations we need to be having at home. And if you can start that in the classroom and then move that to the house, how different our communities and home lives will be. So it's been intentional since the start.
That new definition of storytelling and teaching, the ability for people to remake their relationships in their home with their parents and caregivers is such a vital piece of this, because sharing that was something I came home and went into my bedroom and started doing homework. And as long as my notebook was open, when my mom or dad peeked in, they thought everything was okay. I'm not really sure. I can't remember them ever asking really about what I was working on. As long as I was quote unquote doing homework and getting good grades, but that puts up a wall, I think, between human beings. And I think we've learned here in the modern age that we need fewer walls, right? So if this helps, if this type of digital storytelling can help remake all these relationships, what also makes it important in that K through 12 classroom experience when we're relating with our classmates and our teachers?
I think in the classroom, when we're relating to either our peers or our teachers, there are a couple things that storytelling does. It teaches you to listen. I want to get this correct. You can, it's empathy building. It's, you can feel what somebody's going through rather than saying, oh, I get what you're going through. You actually feel it. And I think stories in the classroom are so important for perspective. And when I say perspective, I also mean stakeholders. So a lot of our lessons, when we present them, we have a series, Girl Rising, which is about a power of a girl's education. One of the questions we ask with every video is whose perspective is missing from this video? Why is that perspective missing from this video? And that sort of solves like almost every problem we could think of. Whose voice is missing from the table? Who should be at the table? Who is the person delivering this message? I mean, these are critical skills that every person needs to succeed in life, yet they're not taught in schools.
Right.
And it takes you from sympathy to empathy. It's not like you're looking at an us and them situation where, oh, I feel bad for her there. It's more of a, this is how I would feel if I was there.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's engagement. Storytelling is engagement. You know, when I went to school, we were lucky if we got a film strip. I'm older than you guys, but you know, it was 12 or 14 frames. It was sort of like a slideshow effect, and these film strips would come through this machine, and we would see drawings of things or pictures of a frog being dissected in biology, and somehow it allowed us all to sort of follow along with the teacher a little better, since we couldn't all gather around her desk and watch her dissect this frog. But this sort of storytelling that allows you to engage empathetically with your classmates, to have conversations with your peers and your teachers, to be able to take it home is a lot more relatable for students, especially in light of something I think that I forget which one of you said it earlier, but this is how kids are learning anyway. On whatever device that they have, they are watching stories, whether it's on TikTok or YouTube or a streamer or, you know, Googling something. They are receiving stories that we have no control over as parents. I'm a dad too. This allows us to have a greater control over what our kids are learning and making it educationally relevant. So I'm assuming what it's a long roundabout way of saying students relate better to this, right?
I mean, they learned how to learn when they were kids from things like Sesame Street, Mr. Rogers, Doc McStuffins, Yo Gabba Gabba, all of these things for little kids. It's just we stopped thinking of teens and tweens when it's about digital content. So they're going out on their own and finding what they can on the internet. And a lot of it is not inspiring.
Let me ask you a question. If inspirational storytelling is the goal, how did you guys, you know, sort of happen upon this approach? This must have been decades in the making.
Well, you know, like I said, it's 2 decades for me, but I didn't see a lot of relevancy in my education, in K-12 and most of university. But it was the stories that engaged me. I have a slight dyslexia, in that I flip letters and numbers. So reading, I don't always get what I need to get out of it. So my own experience sort of led me to this, in that I studied theater in college and I had to read a lot of Shakespeare. I had to read a lot of plays. And my hack was to go to the library and either get the record, yes, records on vinyl, or get a video recording and read along with either the visual or the audio. And that's how I learned. So, you know, some people will say, you know, there's no such thing as learning styles. I say there is such a thing as different learning styles. So this sort of came out of my own necessity. If I was to wave a magic wand and create the perfect education product, what would I do? And reading will always be there, but you know, what about the different, you know, the kids that need that extra or need that engagement or need that visual? We're also hardwired for stories since like the dawn of time, right? You have a bad day. What do you do when you go home? Beginning, middle, and end. This is my day. You go on a date, beginning, middle, and end. We do this. So if it comes so naturally to us, why not bring this into education?
it's fascinating to me, and it just seems like such an obvious way to go, and yet it's something that hasn't been expanded upon to the degree that Explorer Media is doing that. You know, storytelling, empathy, sharing lived experience. You guys have both name-checked a bunch of different shows and explained some of them. Can you give me some other examples from your catalog of some things that we might see on an Explorer Media platform?
I mean, one that I really loved was, we have a video that showed the actual size of the solar system, because you see pictures and it looks like the sun, the earth, it looks like we're all right next to each other. But some guys went out in the desert and built it to scale, and you can see just how big it is.
If you look up an image of the earth and moon, you're going to get a picture where they're quite close together, something like that. But in reality, the earth and moon are about that far apart. That is the earth and the moon to scale. Taking the same concept, but for the solar system, every single picture of the solar system that we ever encounter is not to scale. If you put the orbits to scale on a piece of paper, the planets become microscopic and you won't be able to see them. There is literally not an image that adequately shows you what it actually looks like from out there. The only way to see a scale model of the solar system is to build one.
And it expanded my mind on how big the universe actually is, and how big some of those planets actually are, in a way that if you just told me about it, I don't think I would understand as well as the way they showed it, because you could actually see the crazy difference between what you see on a, usually when you look it up in a book, and what it really is.
Yeah, I grew up seeing that little picture. You'd open it up, it was always a centerfold picture, and the sun was slightly off center so it didn't get caught in the spine, and everything else was sort of like hobbling around it. And I always used to think, well, Saturn's not that far away. It's only over here on this part of the page. Jenny, what sort of examples do you have? What's something that people would be surprised to see in the catalog?
I mean, I'm not going to say surprised, but I think our approach is different. So we've got a new series. We've got 2 episodes. We're going to continue building this out, not just this year, but multiple years, called Origin Stories. And for those people who don't know, Origin Stories is the backstory that informs a superhero. So origin story storytelling. It is a career exploration series. Which is absolutely critical, because if you want to follow statistics, it's something like 1 guidance counselor per 450 kids in a public school. So you can't get to everyone. And videos with a day on the job are like boring. It's usually like a middle-aged white guy sitting in an office talking about how they got there, and they're usually an executive.
Across the world, everyday heroes are working hard to do amazing things.
The goal is to help people, to come up with new medicines that support those people, that help them feel better. My name is Glenda Castro, and this is my origin story.
Glenda Castro works at the Janssen Research Center, which is a part of Johnson & Johnson. Here, she helps develop new medications that help cure diseases and alleviate suffering.
I was born and raised in Mexico. When I was in high school, I knew I wanted to be in healthcare. I want to be a doctor. So I did a summer in the Red Cross. So when I was in that environment, I was helping. I learned how to draw blood, how to suturate. It was a lot of critical learning. It was only when you face that situation when people pass away, I understood I'm not gonna be able to do it. So I was thinking to myself, how can I still helping people? So when I finished college, I knew I wanted to pursue research, and my family was already in the United States. So my dad suggested, come to the States and do your grad school here. At that time, It was a little bit scary for me, go to another country where I don't speak the language. And then I walk away thinking this is too hard.
Glenda returned to Mexico, where she earned a degree in marine biotechnology. But a desire to help people never left her mind. Determined to overcome her fears, she learned English and returned to the United States, pursuing her passion for medical research.
We did it with like animation and graphics, kind of like Marvel Cinematic Universe, but also thinking about a person is not just defined by their job, but so what are like the skill sets? And I'm not talking like I went to school to be a biomedical engineer, but what are like the soft skill sets? So like resilience, dedication, hard work, perseverance, all of these obstacles that people have had to overcome to get where they are today. And I think that approach to, a career path, it's not this, your career path is kind of this way. In telling that story is so much more powerful for a child to think, oh God, at age 13, I have to know what I'm going to do and I have to know where I'm going to college. For the majority of the population, that's just not what it is. So why not lean into that?
It seems to me that this is not so much a remaking of how we learn or of the education system. It's really taking everything that's worked and leaning into it in a very modern way with storytelling that's digital, that can be transported and logged onto from anywhere, downloaded and looked at anywhere, versus a very static line of education that only allows you to be, working from, I'll just say 9 to 5, and then whatever homework time is available in the evenings. Is that accurate?
100%, 100% accurate. One thing we haven't touched on in this approach is also making sure kids see their own experiences and selves represented in the stories that we do tell. We like to bring up a fact that only 1/3 of teens and tweens see themselves reflected just in regular entertainment. Mm-hmm. So you can imagine moving into video-based education, that's going to be the same, if not worse. So I think that's critical to what we're doing. And that's part of the sort of the innovation here is making sure that kids see themselves in their experiences.
Why is that so important?
Well, I can tell you from my history from Mythbusters and being on science-based reality and adventure TV is I have grown women walking up to me today saying, when I was a kid, you were the first girl I saw doing science, and I didn't know you could be an engineer and still wear combat boots. Like getting that kind of feedback where being able to see a woman makes them think I can do this as well. Kids coming up to one of my other co-hosts named Grant. He was Asian American, and I can't tell you how many kids walked up to him and said, I never saw anybody who looked like me on TV before. So I went off and I got my engineering degree. It's real. You see an example of somebody who looks like you. It feels reachable.
Yeah.
And these stories obviously exponentially increase that, because instead of a presenter standing in front of a classroom and a chalkboard, if you're storytelling, you're hearing multiple viewpoints within a 10-minute video, right?
Correct.
It's thrilling. Let's get back to the STEM aspect of this. With STEM teachers or those aspiring to a STEM related career, this kind of storytelling still, I get the skateboard, I get the map of the universe in the desert, but I'm sure there are people shaking their heads saying at some point you sort of run out of story, but story to me is never ending. So I'm assuming you're going to make a pretty good argument that it fits into STEM in an endless sort of way.
Well, the scientific method is just critical thinking, and critical thinking is what is going to help you out in the world in everything you do. Like collecting the data, seeing what the evidence is, making up your own opinion. That can help you with disinformation on social media, as well as trying to figure out the size of the universe. Everything can be you can apply the scientific method to everything. It's just critical thinking. So as far as being STEM oriented, I think it's the easiest thing to do with storytelling. It's all we did with Mythbusters. It's what we do with Crash Test World. It's what we do with all of our STEM series. You want to tell the story of plastic? Start with storytelling. Why did we invent plastic? What's the problem with plastic now? How do we solve these problems? If we can keep everything to some sort of solution base so that we can show how we can find solutions to some of the biggest problems, I feel like this storytelling is what's going to get us from point A to point B.
It also seems to be able to be a lot more motivating. I mean, if you're talking about a problem and a solution, that to me is motivation. I mean, you mentioned empathy before, and moving away from just sympathy, looking at a video, but it's storytelling that you can relate to allows for empathy. It seems that this type of storytelling is the ultimate vehicle for inspiration as well.
I mean, it's what I've always done. So I'm inspired by stories. When I hear a story, it actually brings me to want to do what that person does, or I can understand more. So I can't think of a better educational tool.
Jenny, is that where the lesson planning component comes in? I mean, this is all curriculum based video making. It comes paired with curriculum, right? So then there's lots of other places for teachers to insert, here's great books, here's other resources, here's where your inspiration can jump off to. I mean, this seems like a never-ending 50-minute lesson plan with each given classroom experience.
Absolutely. So the lessons are designed that way. So you watch the 10-minute video, and then there's like a really just tight 40 minutes to round out the class. But then there are always extension ideas. So, can you create a community action? We call it knowledge to action. That's the approach. So we want kids to learn something. Then what do we want them to do after they've acquired that knowledge? Not regurgitate the fact. What is the thing we want them to do to positively impact their community, however they define their community? So yeah, every lesson has that 40-minute little gem. And then here are the 6 other things that you could do if you want to make it 2 days, 5 days, 7 days, an entire month. And then videos will stack on top of each other. So Kari brought up the plastic series. That's 3 videos. That can be 3 months of you winding up petitioning your local government to make sure when you drop something in the recycling bin, you're holding your representatives accountable, and it doesn't actually just go to a dump and get incinerated, but where that's going. So that's how big we're thinking.
That's giant sized, and it's what I love about EXPLR. So if this is inspiring students, right, and it's helping them to learn to interrelate with their classmates in a different way, to be able to take something home to their parents or caregivers. I mean, this seems to cover all the bases, but what about the other side of the classroom? What does EXPLR do for parents and teachers and ultimately school board members? How does this change the game for them? And I'll let you both answer that question.
Teachers, we all learned how hard their job was when we were in lockdown. At least I did. And we know that teachers are underpaid and they are time poor. We can't pay them more, but what we can do is help enhance what they do and give them some extra tools and cut down on their prep time just a little bit, because we've already created a discussion guide for them. So it's the one thing that I feel like we can do to make their experience just richer.
Yeah. So making teachers' lives easier by just giving them one place to go get everything that they need. They know that they walk in at 7:45, they've got a 10-minute video they can show at 8 o'clock. By 9 o'clock, they're done with the lesson. And they know exactly how it aligns to the things that they already have to teach, dictated by whatever school district they're in. So whatever the mandate is, they know how that video aligns and how that lesson aligns. From the parent perspective, I mean, let's be honest. Do you want your kids on YouTube going down the rabbit hole when you have, it starts off as a great video, but you have no idea where they're going to go, what advertising they're going to see? And Kari, I know the story, but you can't bring it up.
Say anything.
But from a parent's perspective, it's similar to being, if you have a young child on a PBS app, you know that everything that they're watching on the PBS app is educational, age appropriate, researched, factual. That's what we strive to do for parents, that this is not a problem. Screen time, not all screen time is equal. And parents are not going to have a problem if a kid wants to just be curious and learn at their own pace and follow sort of what sparks their curiosity and joy.
You just made the relationship from a safety standpoint to PBS, and I'm a parent of a teenager as well, and so when he wanders into the YouTube world, I can feel the hair on the back of my neck stand on end, because I don't know where he's going. But you have some incredible partners that are involved in this, that are helping you guys with lesson plans, et cetera. It's not just the two of you. This is a rather massive undertaking that's been years in the making, right?
Correct. So some of the partners we work with, Amaze, which is a nonprofit, they do medically accurate, age appropriate sex and puberty education. And don't you want your puberty and health education to be medically accurate and age appropriate?
Yes, please.
So we're very proud of that partner. We have museum partners, we have nonprofit partners, and then as we continue to expand our library, we have child wellness partners teed up, ready to go. So yes, we are the storytellers, and we're the people who are, really responsible for curating and creating, but we're bringing the best and the brightest to the table, and it's all in one place. So yes, Amaze is great. They have their own site, but wouldn't it be great if we just had one place where teachers could go to get everything and not manage 25 different passwords and 25 different accounts?
Yeah.
Our biggest partner.
Go ahead.
Our most important partner being World Savvy. They are creating all of the lesson plans that go with our video, and they are leaders in the industry of global competency.
And almost without peer in the industry. This is just so exciting for folks that are, out there that want to learn more about this, et cetera. You talked about one place to go. Jenny, where's the one place to go for people to learn more about EXPLR Media?
EXPLR-classroom.com. Now, we said we have the home version, go to the classroom version. That's where all the lessons live.
Well, this is very exciting. It's a thrilling ride. I can't think of anything more important in the world than how we educate our children. I would challenge anyone on that idea anytime to come at and debate me. I watch my debate lesson planning, so I'm pretty up to snuff on all that type of thing. But what you all are doing is absolutely incredible. Thanks for sharing this time with us today and helping to fill out the storytelling of EXPLR Media. Congratulations, Jenny, Kari. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
See you on the small screen.